Hey, Jack.
Hey, Trevor, how are you?
I'm doing well. Welcome back to another episode of Hey, Jack, Leadership Reflections with Jack Nehlig. Last episode, we talked about being a visionary in leadership, which was one of our last core pillars of leadership that we worked through. I have a lot of, I guess we just call these topics around leadership that I've always been curious about myself, or others that I've spoken to have been curious about, or even have asked me my input and takes on them. So, if you don't mind, this episode, I'd love to shift gears, just start with one of these topics, and then probably over the next couple weeks, we'll hit you with a couple more topics. And some of these, I'm not expecting you to have any prepared answers for. I just want to get your thoughts, maybe what you think, what you reflecting back on might have done different, just wherever it takes us. Does that sound good?
You bet.
All right. So the topic that I'm really curious about, when we talked about being a good leader, I think one of the things that I had asked was being liked as a leader. And, we had talked about that in that episode. And I think kind of something that's really related to that is conflict. And when it comes to conflict in leadership, how do you view that? How do you approach it? What are you thinking about this?
Yeah. Well, this is a good one. And my immediate full body reaction is I reject it, right? So
Interesting.
when people talk about conflict as a catalyst and, is there good conflict in business? And there is good conflict in business. My visceral emotion is I reject the notion. That to me, conflict, it can't be a catalyst. It can't accelerate what you're doing. And let me give you an example in my head. It just popped in my head, right? So can you imagine you're a track star and you run the 440, and track stars always talk about getting in the flow, right? And a lot of athletes talk about getting in the flow. And when they're in the flow, that's when they're performing their best, right? And conflict is a disruption of the flow. So the person's running the 440 and you throw a glass of water in their face at 200 yards, I'm not sure they're going to give you their personal best that day, right? And that was conflict in the middle of the flow. Let's think about work. A team's working on a problem, a pretty serious problem, meeting a hard deadline, and people in the meeting start criticizing each other for their level of performance. Then they go off on a tangent and work on that for a while, as opposed to working on the real problem and keeping it moving forward, right? So conflict as a good, or conflict as a catalyst to a business, to me is not only illogical, but it's wrong. It's not the right way to think. I'll give you some other C words. How about cooperation as a catalyst? How about collaboration as a catalyst, right? Those two C words instead of conflict seem logical to accelerate a business and make things better, right? So, and can you imagine, like, another one jumped in my head back on the, could the conflict be a catalyst, right? You've been part of brainstorming exercises throughout your career, right? Everybody's done brainstorming exercises. And the number one rule in a brainstorming exercise is what? You remember it. It's you never criticize someone's idea.
Yeah. Say no one has a bad idea.
No one has
Criticize it. Yeah.
Which, in the end, everybody agrees there's bad ideas. But it's okay to share your idea, and then we'll judge it later, right? So when you're in the flow of the brainstorming exercise, can you imagine if the brainstorming exercise leader said, okay, here's our ground rule today. Any new idea, and we all attack it immediately. If you disagree with it, you attack it immediately. We're going to try to shoot it down. Then is the next person with their idea going to bring up an idea? Probably not. So then what would be the good of the brainstorming exercise if you said conflict is a catalyst to our brainstorming exercise? It just totally doesn't make sense, right? Even in every business setting that I think about. Now, look, when you see documentaries on the Navy SEALs training or Marines recruits trying to become a Marine or Army, you got the drill sergeant in their face screaming at them. There's a little conflict going on there. And what are they trying to do? Get that person to survive, right? So I guess in certain military settings, some life or death situations, conflict could be properly trained as a catalyst, maybe. But we all work in a business setting.
Yeah.
And I don't see or feel any real reason to say conflict is a favorable in a business setting. What's now coming to my mind is a conclusive thought with all the academics surrounding all these quote great leaders in the world who maybe did deploy conflict. And by the way, I know CEOs and other leaders who do deploy conflict as their method of managing, which means they lead someone on fear, right? Because when you inject conflict into something, someone gets pulled back, they get shocked, they get scared, they get fearful that they're being embarrassed or something, right? Well, all I can think of is maybe the academians said to themselves, well, here's a conflict-based leader and they achieved great results, so there must be something good there. Let's name it. So they put some academic stuff around conflict as a catalyst because they found that some companies survived on highly conflict type environments. Well, that's all great, except for I wonder if that company could have done better if they didn't do the conflict-based environment, right?
Yeah.
So that's my visceral reaction to it, that conflict is not something you should try to nurture or manage properly or improperly in your work environment. It's just something we should acknowledge as maybe a misguided truth of the past. And I tell you, there's been many misguided truths of the past that have been changed. And we talked about one very early on in our podcast. And that's the focus on people and how people used to be thought of as only a number. And that's the way you should think of it. It's kind of the GE Jack Welch thing. And now we're in a different world where people are important and you care for people. And that's how you lead your business. So I think it's that same thing here. I think conflict at one point was raised up as a way to get results. And now I think there's so many more proper ways to do it that we should all shun that theory and not go there.
Yeah, these are great take on that. Not what I was expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, but that's a little different, which is good. And I love what you said about collaboration, because I think conflict is often misrepresented as collaboration, where we hear healthy versus toxic conflict. But healthy conflict, essentially, in my opinion, would be, that's the definition of collaboration, right?
Yeah.
Where people are contributing and they're open-minded to other people's opinions, thoughts, ideas, and so forth. Whereas conflict, that it's healthy, even if you come to
Yeah.
an outcome, it's not healthy. It's you're always going to have winners and losers in conflict, or feelings are going to get misaligned there. So I love that. I do think that's a big issue where people they wrap up the word conflict as collaboration and they kind of mislabel things. So I think that's a really good
Or everyone can transition it. It can be Pavlovian. When you hear a conflict, go to collaboration, go to cooperation.
exactly.
And maybe it'll happen. And look, I realize that maybe the easy button for not so good leaders, but leaders who have accomplished a lot, right? They've gotten far in their career, but they might have some bad habits. I realize a lot of the audience may experience conflict in leadership, and that it's there and they have to deal with it, right? And so I'm not putting my head in the sand and saying it doesn't exist. No, I understand that it exists. What I was rejecting is the thought that it can be a good thing, a catalyst for your business, making your business better. I think people tolerate it, and that's how it lives on. And I highly encourage everybody in leadership to try to push it to the back and replace it with collaboration and cooperation and teamwork and positivity and all the other things we've been harping on. And then you will find, I think it just dries up and goes away. So,
And I think all those things that you just mentioned are what makes a great leader, but conflict is just easier to do.
It's probably easier.
It's easier to do. And I think that's probably what stems a lot of this stuff. So, but yeah, that's great topic. I know I've always been curious about that. So that opened up my mindset a little bit on how I'm going to think about it. I'm sure it's going to help others as well. So appreciate that. And if you're open for it, Jack, next episode, I think we should tackle some more topics like this. What do you think?
That'd be great. I'd love to do this. A little rapid fire stuff.
Yeah, rapid fire. Love it. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Let us know if you enjoyed this little short burst topic session. And if so, we'll keep on pumping these out. So thanks everybody, and we'll catch you guys next time. Take care.
Take care, everybody. Go lead.